The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Michael Patterson pushed his cleaning cart down the sterile corridor of Roosevelt Medical Center. At 35, his hands bore the calluses of 7 years spent working 3 jobs, each shift a testament to the unwavering love he held for the 7-year-old boy walking beside him. "Dad, can I help with the bathroom tonight?" Tommy's voice echoed softly against the polished hospital floors, his small sneakers squeaking with each step. His bright green eyes sparkled with the kind of innocent enthusiasm that never failed to make Mike's chest tighten with fierce protectiveness. "Sure, buddy, but remember our rules," Mike replied, his voice warm with affection as he ruffled Tommy's sandy blonde hair. "Stay close to me, don't touch anything sharp, and if anyone comes, I sit quietly by the cart and pretend to do homework." Tommy finished with a grin, reciting the safety protocol they'd practiced countless times. Mike smiled, though worry gnawed at the edges of his mind. Roosevelt Medical Center paid him $12 an hour for the overnight cleaning shift, barely enough to cover rent on their cramped Southside apartment. But it was honest work, and it allowed him to keep Tommy close during the long Chicago nights when childcare was impossible to afford. As they approached the executive bathroom on the 3rd floor, Mike's thoughts drifted to the familiar weight of questions that had haunted him for 7 years. Tommy's delicate features, his light hair, those striking green eyes, nothing resembled Mike's own dark hair and brown eyes. The contrast was undeniable, yet the love between them was absolutely real. "Dad, why do people at school say we don't look alike?" Tommy asked suddenly, as if reading his father's thoughts. Mike's hands stilled on the spray bottle. This question came more frequently now, and each time it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He knelt down to Tommy's eye level, studying the boy's face with the same mixture of love and uncertainty that had defined their relationship. "What do you think, Tommy? Do we look alike?" Mike asked gently. Tommy tilted his head thoughtfully, his young mind processing the question with remarkable maturity. "No, but Mrs. Chen says I have your smile, and I walk like you do, kind of fast and bouncy." Mike's throat tightened. "That's right. And you know what matters most?" "What?" "That we belong together. That's what makes us family." But even as he spoke those words, Mike felt the familiar ache of uncertainty. For 7 years, he'd saved every spare dollar he could find, planning to get a DNA test. Every time he got close to having enough money, life intervened: Tommy's fever that required an emergency room visit, the broken washing machine, new school supplies that seemed to cost more each year. Deep down, Mike wondered if he was afraid of the truth. What if Tommy wasn't his biological son? What if Grace had been with someone else? The thought terrified him more than any financial struggle ever could. "Dad, you look sad," Tommy said, reaching up to touch Mike's face with his small, warm hand. "Not sad, buddy. Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you." And that was the truth. Whatever DNA might reveal, whatever Grace's secrets might be, Tommy was his son in every way that mattered. Mike had been there for every late-night fever, every first word, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. As they finished cleaning the bathroom and prepared to head to the next section, Mike made a silent promise. Soon he would find the courage and the money to get that test. Not because it would change how he felt about Tommy, but because he needed to know the truth. What Mike didn't know was that the truth was already searching for him, and his carefully constructed world was about to change forever. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the darkness at 5:30 a.m., but Mike was already awake, watching Tommy sleep peacefully in the twin bed across their shared bedroom. 6 hours of sleep was a luxury he'd learned to survive on. His body adapted to the rhythm of 3 jobs and endless responsibility. "Morning, sleepyhead," Mike whispered as Tommy stirred, automatically reaching for the clothes Mike had laid out the night before. By 6 a.m., they were in Mike's 10-year-old Honda Civic, driving through the quiet streets of Chicago toward Lincoln Elementary, where Mike's second job awaited. Tommy would curl up in the janitor's office with his homework, while Mike scrubbed classrooms and sanitized equipment, earning another $40 for 3 hours of work. "Dad, I finished my math," Tommy announced, holding up his worksheet with the perfect handwriting that amazed Mike every day. "Let me see those fractions," Mike said, quickly reviewing the work while unlocking the school side entrance. "Perfect as always." "You're smarter than your old man." "You're not old," Tommy giggled. "You're just tired because you work too much." The wisdom in those 7-year-old words hit Mike hard. How many children Tommy's age understood the concept of working too much? How many had to spend their mornings in empty schools, their evenings in hospital corridors, their weekends watching their father count and recount the same pile of bills. After finishing at Lincoln Elementary, Mike would rush to his third job at Peterson and Associates, a law firm downtown, where he cleaned offices for another 4 hours. The irony wasn't lost on him. He spent his days cleaning the workspaces of lawyers who earned in an hour what he made in a week. The afternoon pickup routine at Lincoln Elementary was their favorite time. Tommy would run to Mike with stories about his day, his face lighting up when he spotted his father pushing a mop bucket down the school corridor. "Mr. Patterson," other children would call out. They all knew him as Tommy's dad who worked at their school, and somehow that made Mike feel less ashamed of his circumstances. That evening, as they shared a dinner of spaghetti and store-brand sauce, Mike counted the bills on their small kitchen table. Rent, utilities, groceries, Tommy's school supplies of every dollar accounted for, with $37 left over. "I can make us lunch for tomorrow," Tommy offered, noticing Mike's worried expression. "I know how to make peanut butter sandwiches really good now." Mike's heart clenched. "You don't need to worry about that, buddy." "I'm not worried. I like helping," Tommy said, already clearing dishes without being asked, a routine he'd developed entirely on his own. "Tommy," Mike said carefully, "why don't I have a wife like Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Chen do?" The question Mike had been dreading hung in the air. Tommy had never asked this directly before, and Mike felt completely unprepared. "Some families are different, Tommy. Some kids have a mom and dad, some just have a dad, some just have a mom. What matters is that someone loves you very much. Do you love me very much? More than all the stars in the sky?" Tommy seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to his dishwashing with the kind of acceptance that both amazed and worried Mike. No 7-year-old should be this understanding about having an absent parent. Later that night, after Tommy fell asleep, Mike opened the coffee can where he kept his DNA test savings. $43. At this rate, it would take another 6 months to afford the $300 test. But as he looked at Tommy sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically, Mike felt that familiar conflict resurface. What if the test confirmed his fears? What if it proved Tommy wasn't his biological son? The thought terrified him more than any amount of poverty or exhaustion ever could. Tomorrow would bring another cycle of 3 jobs, homework help, and bedtime stories. But tonight, Mike made a decision. He would find a way to get that test, whatever it took. The truth, whatever it might be, was waiting for him. 3 weeks into November, the questions started coming more frequently. Mike noticed it first during their evening routine. Tommy would stare at himself in the bathroom mirror while brushing his teeth, then look at Mike with a puzzled expression that made Mike's stomach knot with anxiety. "Dad." Tommy's voice was smaller than usual as Mike tucked him into bed that Friday night. The autumn wind rattled their apartment windows, and the old radiator clanked its familiar rhythm. "What is it, buddy?" Tommy fidgeted with his worn stuffed elephant, the one toy he'd had since Mike could remember. "Today at lunch, Connor said something that made me feel funny inside." Mike's heart rate quickened, but he kept his voice calm. "What did Connor say?" Tommy paused, his green eyes searching Mike's face. "He said, I can't be your real son because we don't look the same. He said real families always look alike." The words hit Mike like a physical blow, but he forced himself to sit on the edge of Tommy's bed, choosing his response carefully. "Tommy, look at me." Mike waited until those innocent eyes met his. "What do you think makes someone a real dad?" Tommy considered this seriously, his 7-year-old mind working through the concept. "I think a real dad is someone who makes you breakfast every morning and reads you stories and stays with you when you're scared." "That's exactly right." Mike's voice was thick with emotion. "A real dad is someone who stays, who takes care of you, who loves you every single day. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does." "What's DNA?" Tommy asked. Mike struggled for age-appropriate words. "It's like instructions inside your body that decide what you look like. But it doesn't decide who loves you or who takes care of you." Tommy seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Mike noticed him studying their reflection in the dresser mirror across the room. The contrast was undeniable: Mike's dark hair and brown eyes, strong jaw and broad shoulders, versus Tommy's delicate features, light brown hair, and those striking green eyes that seemed to see everything. The next afternoon at school pickup, Mrs. Chen, Tommy's teacher, approached Mike with that careful expression adults wore when they needed to discuss something delicate. "Mr. Patterson, could I have a word?" Mike's chest tightened. "Is Tommy in trouble?" "Oh no, quite the opposite. Tommy is exceptional. His reading level is already at 4th grade, and his emotional intelligence is remarkable." She paused, glancing around the bustling hallway. "I was wondering, has he ever been evaluated for gifted programs?" No, I hadn't thought about it." "Well, you should consider it. He's very special." Mrs. Chen hesitated again. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but Tommy mentioned his mother isn't present. If there are programs or resources you need help accessing." Mike felt the familiar shame creep up his neck. "We're managing fine, thank you." "Of course. I just wanted you to know that if you ever need someone to talk to about raising such a bright child, I'm here. Single parenting is challenging, especially with a gifted child who asks such profound questions." That evening, as Mike helped Tommy with homework that seemed advanced for his age, he watched the boy work with an intensity and focus that was both impressive and concerning. Tommy approached every task methodically, never rushing, never cutting corner straights that reminded Mike of someone, though he couldn't place who. "Dad, why am I different from other kids?" Tommy asked suddenly, looking up from his math worksheet. "What do you mean?" "Well, I like reading more than playing video games. And I think about things that make other kids laugh at me, and—" He hesitated. "I don't have a mom. And most kids do." Mike set down his own paperwork bills he'd been trying to organize and gave Tommy his full attention. "Being different isn't bad, Tommy. Sometimes the most special people are the ones who see the world differently. But don't you wonder about my mom sometimes? Like where she is and why she left?" The directness of the question caught Mike off guard. He'd always tried to shelter Tommy from the harsh reality of Grace's abandonment, but his son was clearly more aware than Mike had realized. "I do wonder sometimes," Mike admitted carefully, "but what I know for sure is that her leaving was about her, not about you. You are perfect exactly as you are." That night, after Tommy fell asleep, Mike found himself staring at old photos on his phone, few pictures he had of Grace, trying to see if there were similarities between her and Tommy that he'd missed. The more he looked, the more questions multiplied in his mind. Grace had been beautiful, certainly, but in a different way than Tommy. Her features were sharper, more angular, while Tommy's were softer, more refined. And those green eyes, Mike tried to remember if Grace's eyes had been that distinctive shade of green, but the memories were hazy, clouded by pain and time. By December, Mike had reached his breaking point with uncertainty. Each night, as he counted the money in his coffee can savings, the same questions tormented him. Was he living a lie? Was Tommy really his son? And if not, who was the biological father? The final push came on a Tuesday morning when Tommy asked Mrs. Chen about family trees for a school project. Mike overheard the conversation during pickup, watching his son's face fall when the teacher suggested asking relatives about family history. "We don't really have relatives," Tommy had whispered, and Mike's heart shattered. That evening, Mike made the call to Chicago DNA testing services. "I need to schedule a paternity test," he said quietly into his phone while Tommy showered, the words feeling foreign and terrifying on his tongue. "Certainly, sir. Our standard test is $299, results in 5 to 7 business days." Mike looked at his coffee can. He had $260 saved close enough. He could put the rest on his credit card. "Can you send the results to my workplace instead of my home?" "Of course. We understand privacy concerns." The appointment was set for Saturday morning. Mike told Tommy they were going to take care of some paperwork, which wasn't entirely a lie. Friday night, Mike couldn't sleep. He sat at their small kitchen table, staring at photos on his phone, 7 years of memories with Tommy. First steps, first words, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and countless moments of pure joy. What if the test proved Tommy wasn't his biological son? Would it change how he felt? Would it change everything? Saturday morning arrived with gray December clouds and a nervous energy that made Mike's hands shake as he made breakfast. "Why are you being extra quiet, Dad?" Tommy asked, syrup dripping from his pancakes. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." At the clinic, Mike's anxiety peaked as a technician explained the simple cheek swab procedure. "This doesn't hurt, does it?" Tommy asked, watching the cotton swab with curious eyes. "Not at all, sweetie," the technician smiled. Just like brushing your teeth, but on the inside of your cheek. Mike went first, then helped Tommy with his sample. The whole process took less than 10 minutes, but it felt like crossing a bridge he could never uncross. Results will be sent to your workplace within a week, the technician confirmed, sealing the samples in labeled tubes. Driving home, Tommy chattered about weekend plans, while Mike's mind raced with possibilities. What would he do if his worst fears were confirmed? That afternoon, Mike started something new. He pulled out a photo album he'd never filled and began organizing pictures of their life together every birthday, every school play, every ordinary Tuesday that had become extraordinary because they'd shared it. "What are you doing, Dad?" Tommy asked, climbing onto Mike's lap at the kitchen table. "Making a memory book of all our adventures together. Can I help pick the pictures?" "Of course, buddy." As they worked together, Tommy pointing out his favorites and telling stories Mike had almost forgotten, something became crystal clear. Whatever that test revealed, it wouldn't change the fact that he had raised this remarkable child. It wouldn't erase 7 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion. "Look, Dad." Tommy held up a photo from his 5th birthday. "Remember when I blew out all the candles and wished that you would never have to work 3 jobs anymore?" Mike's throat tightened. "I remember." "Did your wish come true yet?" "Not yet. But you know what? Even if you have to work 10 jobs, as long as we're together, I'm the luckiest kid in the world." Tommy hugged him tightly, and Mike felt a surge of certainty. Whatever the DNA test revealed, this child was his son in every way that truly mattered. But he still needed to know the truth. The waiting would be the hardest part. The envelope arrived at Roosevelt Medical Center on Thursday afternoon, just as Mike was finishing his morning shift. His hands trembled as he recognized the return address. Chicago DNA Testing Services. Mike locked himself in the supply closet, his heart hammering against his ribs as he tore open the sealed envelope. The official letterhead blurred momentarily before his eyes focused on the crucial line, "Probability of paternity, 0%. Michael Patterson is excluded as the biological father of Tommy Patterson." The words hit him like a physical blow. Mike slumped against the closet wall, sliding down until he sat on the cold linoleum floor, the paper shaking in his hands. He wasn't Tommy's father. 7 years of suspicion, 7 years of wondering, and now he knew. Grace had lied about everything. But even as his world tilted sideways, Mike felt an unexpected emotion mixing with the devastation. Relief. The uncertainty that had haunted him for years was finally over. Mike read the results 3 more times, each reading making the reality sink deeper. Somewhere out there was Tommy's biological father, a man who had no idea he had a brilliant, loving, extraordinary 7-year-old son. "Mr. Patterson?" Dr. Martinez's voice called from outside the closet. "Everything okay in there?" "Just organizing supplies," Mike managed, quickly folding the paper and shoving it into his pocket. "Be right out." The rest of his shift passed in a haze. Mike mechanically cleaned examination rooms and restocked supplies while his mind reeled with questions. Who was Tommy's real father? Did Grace know? Had she been cheating on Mike, or was there something else he didn't understand? During his lunch break, Mike sat in his car and called the testing center. "I need to understand something about my results," he said when a technician answered. "Certainly, sir. What questions do you have?" The chilled if. "I'm not the father. Is there any way to determine who is?" "Only if the biological father submits a sample for comparison. We can't identify unknown individuals, just confirm or exclude known candidates." Mike hung up, feeling more lost than ever. That afternoon, picking up Tommy from school, Mike watched his son run toward him with that familiar bright smile, backpack bouncing, completely unaware that everything had changed. "Dad, guess what happened in science class today?" "What, buddy?" Mike forced enthusiasm into his voice, lifting Tommy into their usual after-school hug. "Mrs. Chen showed us how butterflies have DNA that tells them how to make their wings the right colors." "Isn't that cool?" The irony wasn't lost on Mike. "That's very cool." As they drove home, Tommy chattering about his day, Mike made a silent decision. This DNA test changed nothing about how he felt. Tommy was still his sonnet because of shared genetics, but because of shared love, shared struggles, shared laughter, and 7 years of unwavering devotion. That evening, Mike watched Tommy do homework with his usual methodical precision, And instead of wondering whose intelligence he'd inherited, Mike felt proud of the values he'd instilled: the kindness, the work ethic, the resilience. Those came from their life together. "Dad, you seem different today," Tommy observed, looking up from his reading assignment. "Different how?" "I don't know. Like you figured something out, but you're not sure if it's good or bad." Mike marveled at his son's perceptiveness. "You're pretty smart, you know that? I learned it from you." That night, after Tommy fell asleep, Mike sat at their kitchen table with the DNA results spread before him. He thought about Grace, wherever she was, and whether she knew the truth about Tommy's paternity. What Mike didn't know was that Grace knew exactly who Tommy's father was, and that she was already closer than he could imagine. The truth had set Mike free from years of uncertainty, but it was about to bring complications he never could have anticipated. 3 weeks after receiving the DNA results, Mike began noticing things that made the hair on his neck stand up. It started: smaller, dark Mercedes sedan, parked across from their apartment building that wasn't there the next morning, a feeling of being watched during his evening shift at Roosevelt Medical Center. At first, Mike dismissed it as paranoia brought on by the stress of learning Tommy's true parentage, but the signs became harder to ignore. Mr. Patterson Miguel, the security guard at Roosevelt Medical Center, approached Mike during his Thursday night shift. "Someone was asking about you yesterday." Mike's mop handle slipped in his grip. "Asking what exactly?" "Your schedule, how long you've worked here, whether you ever bring anyone with you." Miguel looked concerned. Professional-looking woman, real polite, but something felt off. "She said she was updating employee records, but I checked with management. No one authorized any record updates." Mike's mouth went dry. "Did she give a name?" "Grace something. Left before I could get details." That Friday afternoon, Mike's anxiety spiked when Mrs. Chen pulled him aside during pickup. "Mr. Patterson, I need to inform you of something unusual. A woman approached Tommy during recess yesterday, asking questions about his family situation." Mike's protective instincts flared instantly. "What kind of questions?" "She asked if he was happy at home, whether he ever talked about missing his mother, how long he'd lived with just his father." Mrs. Chen's expression was serious. "Tommy said she seemed nice, but that she looked sad when she talked to him. He mentioned she had pretty green eyes, like his." Mike's blood turned cold. Green eyes like Tommy's. Did she identify herself? Show any credentials? "No, and that's what concerns me. Our playground monitors approached her, but she left quickly. I've already contacted the main office and increased supervision during outdoor activities." That evening, Mike knelt to Tommy's eye level in their small living room. "Buddy, Mrs. Chen told me about the lady who talked to you yesterday. Can you tell me exactly what she said?" Tommy shifted his backpack, thinking carefully. "She asked if I liked living with just you, and if I ever wondered about my mommy. When I said, 'You're the best dad ever and I don't need anyone else,' she looked like she might cry." "Did she say her name?" "She said to call her Grace. She said she knew someone who cared about me very much, but lived far away." Mike's mind raced. The same name Miguel had mentioned. Grace. Someone was investigating them, asking about Tommy specifically, and they knew enough to approach his son directly. That evening, Mike called Lincoln Elementary's principal and filed a formal complaint. He also contacted the police non-emergency line, though the officer explained that without threats or actual harm, there was little they could do beyond documenting the incident. Mike's sleep became fitful, filled with anxiety about who might be watching them and why. During his weekend shifts, he found himself constantly checking over his shoulder, scanning for unfamiliar faces or that dark Mercedes. On Monday morning, as Mike dropped Tommy at school, he noticed a woman in expensive clothes standing near the crosswalk, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast December day. She seemed to be watching the school entrance, but when Mike looked directly at her, she turned away and walked quickly toward a luxury car parked down the street. "Dad, that's her," Tommy whispered, tugging on Mike's sleeve. "That's the lady who talked to me." Mike's heart hammered, but by the time he could react, the woman was gone, leaving only the faint scent of expensive perfume and Mike's growing certainty that their carefully constructed life was about to change forever. Someone knew about Tommy, someone with money, connections, and the kind of resources that could hire investigators. Mike had a terrible feeling he knew who that someone might be. But Grace had been gone for 7 years. Why would she come back now? And more importantly, what did she want? Mike's world became a maze of shadows and second-guessing. The mysterious surveillance escalated throughout the week, transforming from subtle observation to an unmistakable invasion of their privacy. Tuesday morning brought the first phone call. Mike answered his cell during his break at Roosevelt Medical Center, but heard only silence before the line went dead. When he checked the caller ID, it showed unknown number. The calls continued always at different times, always the same pattern. Someone would call, Mike would answer, and after a few seconds of silence, they'd hang up. "Dad, why do you look scared when your phone rings?" Tommy asked Thursday evening as they shared dinner at their small kitchen table. Mike forced a smile. "Not scared, buddy. Just wondering who keeps calling and not talking." "Maybe they're shy," Tommy suggested with 7-year-old logic that made Mike's heart ache. How could he explain to his innocent son that someone was hunting them? The surveillance became bolder. Mike spotted the same dark Mercedes 3 different times during his commute between jobs. When he deliberately took an unusual route to test his suspicions, the car followed. When he stopped at a gas station and watched in his rearview mirror, the sedan parked across the street and waited. Miguel, the security guard at Roosevelt Medical Center, approached Mike with more disturbing news during his Wednesday night shift. "That woman came back," Miguel reported. This time she had official-looking papers. Claimed she was conducting a welfare assessment for family court. Asked about your work performance, whether you seem stable, if the kid you bring sometimes appears well cared for. What did you tell her? The truth that you're the hardest worker we've got, and that boy of yours is polite and smart as a whip. Miguel's expression darkened. But I told her she needed to go through proper channels if she wanted official information. She didn't like that answer. Mike's hands clenched around his cleaning supplies. Someone was building a case against him, documenting his life, investigating his fitness as a parent. But why? Friday afternoon brought the most unsettling development yet. During their usual after-school conversation, Tommy revealed more details about his encounter with the mysterious woman. "Dad, I remembered something else about the pretty lady," Tommy said as they walked to Mike's car. "What's that, buddy?" "When she looked at me, she touched her heart and said I reminded her of someone very special who she missed every day." Tommy paused, his green eyes serious. "And she knew my name, even though I didn't tell her." Mike stopped walking. "She knew your name?" She said, "You must be Tommy," like she already knew who I was. And when I said yes, she started crying. Not loud crying, but her eyes got all watery, and she kept staring at my face like she was trying to remember something. Mike's blood ran cold. This wasn't random surveillance or a case of mistaken identity. Someone knew exactly who Tommy was, had specific knowledge about their lives, and was conducting what felt like reconnaissance. That evening, Mike made a difficult decision. He called the one lawyer he could afford, a legal aid attorney who handled family court cases pro bono. "Mr. Patterson, what you're describing sounds like someone is preparing for a custody challenge," the lawyer explained over the phone. "The systematic investigation, the documentation of your work schedule and living situation, approaching the child directly, these are classic tactics. But who would challenge me for custody? Tommy's mother abandoned us 7 years ago. Birth parents have rights that can be exercised even after extended absence, especially if they can demonstrate changed circumstances or claim they weren't able to care for the child previously due to temporary hardships." Mike felt sick. What should I do? Document everything. Keep a detailed log of all surveillance. Save those phone calls if possible. Report any direct contact with your son to authorities. And Mr. Patterson, prepare yourself for the possibility that someone is going to make a legal move soon. That night, after Tommy fell asleep, Mike sat at their kitchen table and started a surveillance log, writing down every incident, every strange phone call, every sighting of the dark Mercedes. His hands shook as he documented the evidence that someone was preparing to tear apart the only family Tommy had ever known. Outside their apartment window, Mike spotted the familiar dark sedan parked under a streetlight. For the first time in 7 years, he felt genuine fear about losing the child who had become his entire world. The hunter was closing in, and Mike still didn't know who it was or how to fight back. Mike spent his Saturday morning in the cramped office of Rebecca Martinez, a family law attorney who worked with legal aid cases. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she reviewed the surveillance log Mike had meticulously documented. "Mr. Patterson, I need to be frank with you, Rebecca said, her expression grave. Your legal position is extremely vulnerable. Mike's stomach dropped. What do you mean? You never formally adopted Tommy, and now you know you're not his biological father. In family court, that puts you at a significant disadvantage if the biological mother decides to assert her parental rights. But she abandoned him. She's been gone for 7 years. Abandonment is difficult to prove legally, especially if she can claim she was young, scared, or facing circumstances that prevented her from caring for the child. Courts prioritize biological connections and financial stability. Rebecca leaned forward, her tone becoming more urgent. The surveillance you've documented suggests someone is building a case. They're documenting your work schedule, living conditions, and financial situation. Mike felt his world crumbling. What can I do? Start building your own case immediately. Document everything: photos of your relationship with Tommy, letters from teachers, neighbors, employers. Get statements about your parenting, his emotional attachment to you, proof of consistent care and support. Mike spent the rest of Saturday gathering evidence. He compiled 7 years of school records, medical appointments he'd attended, photos of birthdays and holidays, testimonials from Mrs. Chen and other teachers who'd witnessed their bond. That evening came the hardest conversation of Mike's life. Tommy, I need to tell you something very important, Mike said as they sat together on their worn couch. Am I in trouble? Not at all, buddy. Remember when you asked if I was your real dad? Well, I found out some information about that. Mike chose his words carefully, explaining that sometimes moms and dads aren't together when babies are born, and that he'd raised Tommy since he was tiny, even though they didn't share the same DNA. So my mom left you with me, even though you weren't my biological father? Tommy processed this with startling maturity. Yes, but that doesn't change anything about how much I love you. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Does this mean my real biological father is somewhere else? Yes, probably. But Tommy, listen to me carefully. Biology doesn't make someone a real parent. Love does. Taking care of someone every day does. Being there when they need you does. So you're my real dad because you chose to love me, even when you didn't have to? Mike's eyes filled with tears. Exactly. That makes you even more special then, Tommy said, hugging Mike tightly. Because you wanted me, not just because you had to. The wisdom in those words from his 7-year-old son nearly broke Mike's heart. Tommy, there's something else. I think the woman who's been watching us might be your biological mother. She might try to meet us soon. Will she try to take me away from you? Mike couldn't lie to him. I don't know. But I want you to remember something. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you are my son, and I will fight for you with everything I have. That night, Mike prepared for battle. He organized all his documentation, reviewed his legal options, and mentally prepared himself for a war he never wanted to fight. What Mike didn't know was that the war was about to begin much sooner than he expected, and his adversary was someone whose wealth and determination would test every ounce of his love and resilience. The next evening would change everything. Sunday night at Roosevelt Medical Center felt different from the moment Mike and Tommy arrived for his shift. The usual quiet comfort of their routine was replaced by an electric tension that made Mike's skin crawl with unease. Dad, why do you keep looking at the elevators? Tommy asked as he arranged his homework on the security desk where Mike always set up their workspace. Just being careful, buddy. Remember what we talked about. Stay close to me tonight. Mike had barely started cleaning the first floor when he heard the elevator ding at 10:47 p.m. His blood froze as he watched the doors slide open to reveal a woman who looked like a ghost from his past, yet completely transformed. Dr. Grace Hamilton stepped into the fluorescent-lit hallway, wearing an expensive Armani coat and designer heels that clicked against the marble floor with authority. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, her entire presence radiating wealth and confidence. But her green eyes, the same striking green as Tommy's were, filled with a desperate hunger that made Mike's protective instincts explode. Hello, Michael, she said softly, her voice trembling despite her composed appearance. Mike instinctively moved between Grace and Tommy, who looked up from his homework with curious confusion. The boy had never seen his father react with such immediate, visceral fear. Grace! Mike's voice was barely a whisper, his heart hammering against his ribs. What are you doing here? I think you know. Her eyes moved past Mike to focus on Tommy with an intensity that was both loving and heartbreaking, He's so beautiful. He's grown so much. You've been watching us, Blake stated, his voice gaining strength from anger. The investigators, the surveillance, the phone calls, that was all you. I had to know he was safe. I had to see what kind of man you'd become, what kind of father. Grace's voice broke slightly. I hired Sarah Mitchell 6 months ago to find you both. Tommy stood up slowly, his 7-year-old mind processing the tension between the adults. Dad, who is this lady? Grace's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she heard Tommy call Mike Dad with such natural love and trust. Tommy, Mike said carefully, this is Grace. She's someone from my past. She's the one who's been watching us. The pretty lady with green eyes? Tommy's voice was steady, but he moved closer to Mike. Grace knelt to Tommy's eye level, maintaining distance but drinking in every detail of his face. Yes, sweetheart. I'm sorry if I scared you. I wanted to see how wonderful you'd become. Grace, you need to leave, Mike said firmly. You can't just show up after 7 years and... I know what you found out, Grace interrupted, standing slowly. The DNA test. You know Tommy isn't your biological son. Mike felt the blood drain from his face. How could you possibly? Because I've always known whose son he is. Grace's voice was barely audible. Dr. Jonathan Hamilton was his biological father, Michael, my late husband. Tommy is Jonathan's son, not yours. The revelation hit Mike like a physical blow, even though part of him had suspected something like this. But hearing it confirmed, seeing the pain and guilt in Grace's eyes, made the betrayal feel fresh and devastating. You knew, Mike whispered. All along, you knew you were leaving me with a child that wasn't mine. We both knew, Grace confessed, her composure completely shattered now. Jonathan and I, we were cowards. We chose our careers, our future, over responsibility. We convinced ourselves you'd be better for Tommy than we ever could be. Tommy looked between the adults, understanding more than Mike realized. You're my biological mother, aren't you? Grace nodded, unable to speak. And my biological father? He died last year, Grace managed. Cancer. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the building's ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic 22 floors below. Mike stared at the woman who had destroyed his life 7 years ago and was now threatening to destroy it again, wondering what she wanted and how he could possibly protect the child who meant everything to him. The hallway seemed to shrink around them as Grace's confession hung in the air like poison. Mike felt 7 years of questions suddenly crystallize into a rage, so pure it threatened to consume him. Jonathan Hamilton, Mike repeated slowly, the name foreign on his tongue. Your colleague. The man you were having an affair with while we were together. Grace flinched, but nodded. It started as a workplace relationship. When I got pregnant, Jonathan had tests done immediately. He was methodical about everything, including abandoning his own son. Understand what? Mike's voice rose, causing Tommy to step closer to him instinctively. That you two planned this? That you deliberately left me with a baby you knew wasn't mine? Grace's tears flowed freely now. We were young and selfish. Jonathan was building his practice, and I was ambitious. We convinced ourselves that a baby would ruin everything we'd worked for. So you ruined my life instead. We thought you'd figure it out eventually and give him up for adoption. We never imagined you'd raise him as your own for 7 years. Mike stared at her in disbelief. You thought I'd abandon a 3-month-old baby? What kind of monsters were you? Tommy tugged on Mike's sleeve. Dad, you're scaring me. Mike immediately knelt down, forcing his voice to become gentle. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not angry at you, I promise. This is grown-up stuff that has nothing to do with you. Grace watched this interaction with a mixture of heartbreak and wonder. Look how he trusts you completely. Look how much he loves you. Because I earned it, Mike said fiercely, standing back up. Because I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. Because I chose him every single day for 7 years while you and Jonathan lived your perfect lives, pretending he didn't exist. It wasn't perfect, Grace whispered. Jonathan died alone and bitter, consumed by regret, and I've been empty for years, knowing I abandoned the most precious thing in my life. Then why now? Why come back now? Grace's composure cracked completely. Because Jonathan left me everything, hundreds of millions of dollars, companies, properties, and all I could think about was the son we threw away like he meant nothing. Money, Mike said with disgust. You think money fixes this? I don't want to fix it with money, Michael. I want to fix it by giving Tommy the life he deserves. The education, the opportunities, the future that only I can provide now. Mike felt ice form in his veins. What are you saying? I'm saying I want my son back. The words hit Mike like a physical assault. Tommy pressed against his leg, sensing the shift in energy even if he didn't understand the full implications. He's not your son, Mike said quietly, dangerously. You gave up that right 7 years ago when you walked out that door. Biologically, he is my son. And Jonathan's, we have rights, Michael. Legal rights. Jonathan is dead, but I'm not. And I have resources now that can give Tommy everything you never could. Grace's voice grew stronger, more determined. Private schools, travel, college funds, opportunities beyond anything you could imagine. Mike pulled Tommy closer, his protective instincts in overdrive. We're leaving. Don't contact us again. Michael, wait. Grace's voice stopped him. I've already spoken with attorneys. I have a very strong case for regaining custody. I'm his biological mother. I have unlimited resources, and I can prove I'm now capable of providing superior care. Mike's world tilted on its axis. You're threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. But either way, I'm going to be part of Tommy's life again. The silence stretched between them, filled with 7 years of pain, betrayal, and love. Mike knew his war had just begun. Grace stepped closer, her designer heels echoing in the empty hallway as she sensed Mike's shock. Her tears had stopped, replaced by a cold determination that frightened Mike more than her grief had. I don't want to fight you, Michael. Despite everything, I can see you've been a good father to him. She glanced at Tommy, who was clutching Mike's leg with growing anxiety. But I can offer him so much more than this. This? Mike's voice was sharp with offense. Working 3 jobs, bringing a 7-year-old to office buildings at midnight, living in a cramped apartment. Grace's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel, which somehow made it worse. I can give him private tutors, the best schools in the country, travel, culture, everything. Mike felt Tommy's grip tighten on his leg. Material things don't make a family, Grace. No, but they provide opportunities. Tommy is clearly gifted, his teachers have told me so. He deserves to reach his full potential. You've been talking to his teachers? Mike's blood pressure spiked. I've been thorough in my research. Grace reached into her expensive purse and pulled out a legal document. This is a custody petition, ready to be filed. But I'd prefer to handle this privately, without traumatizing Tommy with a court battle. Mike stared at the papers like they were a loaded weapon. What exactly are you proposing? Tommy comes to live with me. I can provide him with everything education at elite prep schools, summer programs at prestigious universities, exposure to art, music, languages. A life of possibilities instead of limitations. And me? Grace's expression softened slightly. I'm not heartless, Michael. I recognize the sacrifices you've made, the love you've given him. I'm prepared to offer you generous compensation for your time and care. Mike felt like he'd been slapped. Compensation? You want to buy my son from me? I want to do what's best for Tommy while acknowledging your contribution to his life. My contribution? Mike's voice rose again, causing Tommy to look up with worried eyes. I'm his father, Grace, not a babysitter you can pay off. But you're not his father, are you? Not biologically. The courts will see a wealthy biological mother who can provide superior care versus a working-class man with no legal claim. Mike knelt down to Tommy's level, speaking softly. Buddy, can you go sit by the elevator and work on your homework for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to finish talking. Tommy hesitated. Are you going to be okay, Dad? I'm going to be fine. I just need you to give us some space for a minute. Once Tommy was out of immediate earshot, Mike stood and faced Grace with barely controlled fury. Let me make something crystal clear. Tommy is my son in every way that matters. I've been his father since he was 3 months old. I'm not selling him to you for any amount of money. Michael, be reasonable. Think about his future. I am thinking about his future. A future with the only parent he's ever known, the parent who chose him every single day. Grace's composure cracked again. I made a mistake 7 years ago. A terrible, selfish mistake. But I can't undo it. All I can do is try to make it right now. By taking him away from the only family he's ever known, by giving him the life he deserves. Michael, look around you. Look at where you're having this conversation in an office building at 11 o'clock at night with a 7-year-old child present. This isn't the life any child should have. Mike felt the weight of her words, the truth in them that he tried to ignore for years. But his love for Tommy burned stronger than his shame about their circumstances. You have 1 week to consider my offer, Grace said, gathering her composure. After that, I filed a custody petition. And Michael? My attorneys are very, very good. As she walked toward the elevator, Mike called after her. Why now? Why didn't you come back when he was 2 or 4 or 5? Grace paused without turning around. Because I was a coward, and because I thought if enough time passed, the guilt would fade. She pressed the elevator button. It never did. The elevator doors closed, leaving Mike alone with Tommy and the devastating realization that his worst nightmare was about to begin. Mike didn't sleep for the next 3 days. He spent every free moment researching family law, calling attorneys, and documenting every aspect of his relationship with Tommy. When Grace's deadline passed on Thursday, Mike wasn't surprised to receive a call from Rebecca Martinez on Friday morning. Michael, they filed. Official custody petition came through the court system this morning. Rebecca's voice was grim. Grace Hamilton versus Michael Patterson, regarding custody of minor child Tommy Patterson. Mike's knees nearly buckled. What happens now? Emergency hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday. She's requesting immediate temporary custody pending full evaluation. Rebecca paused. Michael. Her legal team is formidable. Sterling, Blackwood, and Associates. They specialize in high-stakes family law, and I have legal aid. We'll fight hard, but I need you to understand what we're up against. She's claiming abandonment was due to postpartum depression and financial instability, but that she's now capable of providing superior care. Mike felt sick. She's rewriting history. Courts hear that story frequently. The narrative of a young mother who made a mistake but now has resources to correct it plays well with judges. That afternoon, Mike was served with official papers at Roosevelt Medical Center. The petition detailed Grace's claims: substantial financial resources, stable home environment, biological mother's rights, and concern for child's current living conditions and educational opportunities. Mike's anger turned to cold determination. If Grace wanted a war, he'd give her one. Dad, why are you so sad lately? Tommy asked that evening as they shared dinner at their small table. Mike had been dreading this conversation, but Tommy deserved honesty. Remember Grace, the lady we met the other night? She wants to take you to live with her. Tommy's fork clattered against his plate. But I don't want to live with her. I want to live with you. I know, buddy, and I'm going to fight to make sure that happens. But there might be some difficult times ahead. What kind of difficult times? We'll have to go to court, where a judge will decide what's best for you. There will be people asking you questions, and they might visit our home. Tommy's green eyes filled with determination that reminded Mike painfully of Grace. I'll tell them I want to stay with you. I'll tell them you're the best dad in the whole world. Mike's throat tightened. That means everything to me, Tommy. But I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, remember that I love you more than anything in this world. Are they going to take me away from you? Mike couldn't lie to him. I don't know, but I'm going to fight with everything I have to keep our family together. Wednesday's hearing was a nightmare. Grace appeared with 3 expensive attorneys while Mike sat beside Rebecca in her rumpled suit. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, listened as Grace's lead attorney painted a picture of a reformed mother with unlimited resources facing off against an unrelated man with minimal means. Your Honor, the attorney argued, Miss Hamilton acknowledges her past mistakes but has demonstrated remarkable personal growth and financial stability. She can provide educational opportunities, health care, and lifestyle advantages that Mr. Patterson simply cannot match. Rebecca fought back hard, emphasizing Mike's 7 years of devoted parenting and Tommy's emotional attachment. But Mike could see the judge's expression shifting as Grace's financial statements and home evaluation photos were presented. Given the significant disparity in resources and the biological mother's demonstrated capacity for care, the judge ruled, I'm granting temporary custody to Miss Hamilton pending full evaluation. Mr. Patterson will have supervised visitation rights on weekends. Mike felt his world collapse as the gavel fell. Tommy would be leaving him that evening. The look of betrayal and terror in Tommy's eyes when Mike explained the court's decision was something Mike knew he'd never forget. His son was being taken away, and he was powerless to stop it. Mike's hands shook as he packed Tommy's clothes into the small suitcase they'd bought at a thrift store years ago. Each item felt like a piece of his heart being torn away: the dinosaur pajamas they'd picked out together, the worn sneakers that had walked through countless adventures. I don't want to go, Dad, Tommy whispered, clutching his stuffed elephant. Please don't make me go. Mike knelt beside his son, fighting back tears that threatened to break him completely. I'm not making you go, buddy. The judge decided this, and we have to follow the rules. But remember what I told you, this doesn't change how much I love you. When Grace arrived with her driver, Tommy clung to Mike so desperately that the court-appointed supervisor had to gently separate them. I'll see you this Saturday, okay? Just 4 days, Mike promised, his voice breaking as Tommy was led away, sobbing. Grace's mansion in Lincoln Park was everything money could buy: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a bedroom larger than Mike's entire apartment. But wealth couldn't purchase what Tommy needed most. This is your room, sweetheart, Grace said, opening the door to reveal a professionally decorated space with expensive toys still in their packages. Tommy stood in the doorway like a lost soul. Where's my elephant? Right here. But wouldn't you like to try some of these new toys? I want to go home. I want my dad. The first night was catastrophic. Tommy screamed for Mike until exhaustion overtook him. Grace hired a child psychologist, a pediatric sleep specialist, even a full-time nanny, but nothing helped. Meanwhile, Mike's world crumbled. He called in sick to Roosevelt Medical Center, unable to concentrate. When he tried to work his shift at Lincoln Elementary, he broke down sobbing in the same hallway where he'd cleaned for years. Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry, but we need someone reliable, his supervisor explained when Mike missed his third shift. Mike lost 2 of his 3 jobs within a week, surviving on his remaining income from Peterson and Associates. The cruel irony of losing everything while Tommy lived in luxury across town wasn't lost on him. Saturday's supervised visit was torture for both of them. Tommy threw himself into Mike's arms, refusing to let go when the 2 hours ended. Please take me home, Dad. She's nice, but she's not you. I don't want all those toys. I just want you. Mike's heart shattered, watching Tommy being led away again, the boy's desperate cries echoing in the family services office. Grace watched from the parking lot, witnessing the raw bond between Mike and Tommy that no amount of money could replicate. For the first time since winning custody, she began to question whether legal victory meant doing what was right. Back at the mansion, Tommy refused dinner again, sitting by his bedroom window and staring toward the direction of their old apartment building. I miss my dad, he whispered to his elephant, the only constant from his real home. Grace stood outside his door, listening to her biological son's heartbreak and beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. 3 weeks into the custody arrangement, Grace stood outside Tommy's bedroom door, listening to sounds that broke her heart, nightly muffled sobs, and whispered pleas for Dad that no amount of expensive toys or professional intervention could silence. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist Grace had hired, delivered a devastating assessment during their Tuesday morning consultation. Miss Hamilton, Tommy is displaying classic symptoms of separation trauma. His refusal to eat, the regression in behavior, the sleep disturbances, these are serious indicators that this arrangement is psychologically harmful. But surely, with time, he'll adjust? Children don't adjust to being separated from their primary attachment figure. Mr. Patterson has been Tommy's sole parent for 7 years. You're essentially asking a child to forget the only father he's ever known. That evening, Grace watched helplessly as Tommy sat by his window again, holding his stuffed elephant and staring into the distance. Tommy, sweetheart, would you like to video call one of your school friends? I want to call Dad. We've discussed this. The court said you can only talk to him during supervised visits. Why? He didn't do anything wrong. Why are you punishing him for loving me? The question hit Grace like a physical blow. In her 7-year-old son's mind, she was the villain punishing the hero who had saved him. The breaking point came Thursday night. Grace woke to screaming from Tommy's room and found him in the midst of a full panic attack, hyperventilating and calling for Mike with desperate, terrified cries. "I can't breathe. I want my dad. Please, I can't breathe." Grace held him while paramedics were called, watching her biological son fight for air while sobbing for another man. As the ambulance rushed them to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Grace finally understood the truth she'd been avoiding. She wasn't saving Tommy. She was destroying him. Dr. Rodriguez in the emergency room was direct. "This child is suffering from severe separation anxiety. Whatever caused this displacement needs to be addressed immediately, or we're looking at long-term psychological damage." Friday evening, Grace made a decision that went against every legal victory she'd achieved. She drove to Mike's apartment, finding him in a state that shocked her. Mike opened the door looking hollow-eyed and broken, having clearly lost weight and sleep. His apartment, while small, was filled with evidence of 7 years of devoted parenting, photos of Tommy everywhere, his artwork taped to the refrigerator, his small desk where he'd done homework. "Grace, what's wrong? Is Tommy okay?" The immediate concern in Mike's voice, despite everything she'd put him through, made Grace's guilt overwhelm her completely. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I've made a terrible mistake." Mike stepped aside, letting her in. "What do you mean?" "Tommy isn't thriving with me. He's suffering badly. Last night he had a panic attack so severe we ended up in the emergency room." Mike's face went white. "Is he hurt?" "Not physically, but emotionally." Grace's voice broke. "I thought I could give him everything he needed, but I can't give him the one thing that matters most, which is you. You're his father, Michael. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. I see that now." Mike sank into his threadbare couch, overwhelmed. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I want to withdraw the custody petition. I want Tommy to come home, where he belongs." Grace paused, gathering courage. "But I'm hoping you might let me earn a place in his life. Not as his mother taking him away from you, but as someone who cares about him and wants to support the family you've built." Mike stared at her in disbelief. "You'd give up legal custody?" "I'd give up anything to stop hurting that beautiful boy. He belongs with you, Michael. I just hope that someday he might have room in his heart to forgive me." For the first time in 3 weeks, Mike felt hope. The next morning, Grace's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the custody petition. By afternoon, Tommy was back in Mike's arms, clinging to his father like he never wanted to let go. "I knew you'd come get me, Dad," Tommy whispered against Mike's shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't give up." "Never, buddy. I will never give up on you." Grace watched from her car as Mike carried Tommy into their apartment building. She had lost her legal battle, but for the first time in 7 years, she felt like she might have won something more important: the chance to do the right thing. The reunion was everything Mike had dreamed of and more. Tommy refused to let go of his father for hours, as if afraid Mike might disappear again. They sat on their worn couch, Tommy curled against Mike's side, both of them crying tears of relief and joy. "I'm sorry I couldn't stop them from taking you," Mike whispered into Tommy's hair. "It wasn't your fault, Dad. You fought for me. Grace told me how hard you fought." "She did?" "She said you loved me so much that you were willing to fight the whole world to keep me. She said that's what real dads do." Mike looked up to see Grace standing in their doorway, tears streaming down her face. "I hope it's okay that I came up," she said softly. "I wanted to make sure Tommy was settled." "Grace helped me pack my stuff," Tommy said, not moving from Mike's side. "She said she was sorry for taking me away from you." Grace knelt down beside the couch. "Tommy, I need you to know something. I made a terrible mistake. I thought I could give you a better life, but I was wrong. Your dad," her voice caught, "your dad gave you the best life possible. He gave you love." "I know," Tommy said simply, "but maybe you could be part of our family too? Not as my mom, because I don't need a mom, but as a friend." Grace's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I would be honored to be your friend, Tommy, if your dad says it's okay." Mike looked at the woman who had almost destroyed their family, seeing now not the entitled doctor who had tried to buy his son, but a broken person who had finally learned what really mattered. "We'll see," Mike said carefully. "But if you want to be part of Tommy's life, it has to be on his terms. And mine." "I understand," Grace said. "I have a lot to make up for." As Grace prepared to leave, Tommy called out to her. "Grace?" Thank you for bringing me home. Thank you for teaching me what home really means, she replied. After Grace left, Mike and Tommy sat in comfortable silence, processing everything that had happened. Dad, are you mad at Grace? Mike considered the question carefully. I was. But I think she learned something important, that being a parent isn't about what you can buy someone. It's about choosing to love them every day, even when it's hard. Like you chose to love me? Exactly like that. Then maybe Grace can learn to love like that too. Mike hugged his son tighter, marveling at the wisdom and forgiveness in Tommy's young heart. Maybe, just maybe, their family was about to grow in a way none of them had expected. 2 months after Tommy's return, life had settled into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and transformed. Mike had been rehired at Roosevelt Medical Center after Grace personally vouched for his reliability and work ethic. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman who had nearly destroyed his life was now helping to rebuild it. Tommy had returned to Lincoln Elementary with renewed enthusiasm, though he still occasionally woke from nightmares about being taken away. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist Grace had hired, now worked with Tommy on a pro bono basis, helping him process the trauma of separation and reunion. He's remarkably resilient, Dr. Chen told Mike during one of their sessions. The strength of your bond with him is what's allowing him to heal so quickly, but I want to continue monitoring his progress. Mike nodded, watching Tommy through the office window as he played with building blocks, constructing what looked like a house. He's always been strong, stronger than any kid should have to be. That strength comes from feeling secure in your love, Dr. Chen observed. He never doubted that you would fight for him. That kind of certainty is rare and precious. Grace had kept her word about staying in the background. She called once a week to check on Tommy's well-being, always speaking to Mike first and only talking to Tommy if he wanted to. She had also done something that surprised Mick. She'd started a foundation. The Patterson Foundation for Single Parents, she explained during one of their carefully structured visits. I want to help other families stay together, provide resources, legal aid, childcare assistance, all the things that could have prevented this mess if I'd been thinking clearly 7 years ago. Mike studied her across the table at the family-friendly restaurant where they'd agreed to meet. Tommy was in the play area, visible through the window, giving them a chance to talk privately. Why are you doing this, Grace? Really? Because I need to do something meaningful with Jonathan's money. Because I need to make amends. And because... She paused, watching Tommy climb through a tunnel. Because I want to be someone that boy can be proud to know. You don't have to earn his love, Grace. Kids don't work that way. No, but I need to earn my own self-respect. I need to become someone worthy of the forgiveness you've both shown me. Their conversation was interrupted by Tommy running over, his face flushed with excitement. Dad, Grace, come see what I built in the blocks area. Mike and Grace exchanged glances. It was the first time Tommy had addressed them as a unit, and it felt significant. Tommy led them to an elaborate block construction house with multiple rooms, a yard, and what appeared to be a separate, smaller building. This is our apartment, Tommy explained, pointing to the main structure. And this is your house, Grace. See how they're connected by this bridge? That way you can visit whenever you want, but we still have our own space. Grace knelt beside the construction, her eyes misting. It's perfect, Tommy. Absolutely perfect. Do you like it, Dad? Mike crouched down, studying his son's architectural vision. I think it's brilliant. You figured out how to make everyone happy. That's what families do, right? They figure out how to make everyone happy. Grace and Mike looked at each other over Tommy's head, both thinking the same thing. When had this 7-year-old become wiser than both of them? As spring arrived, their unconventional family arrangement began to feel more natural. Grace would join them for Sunday dinners, always bringing groceries and insisting on cooking. She was surprisingly good at it, explaining that she'd learned out of necessity during her medical residency. I lived on ramen and coffee for 4 years, she told Tommy one evening, as she prepared his favorite spaghetti and meatballs. I promised myself that when I finally had a real kitchen, I'd learn to cook properly. Why didn't you cook for your other family? Tommy asked innocently. Grace's hands stilled on the wooden spoon. Mike tensed, ready to intervene, but Grace handled the question with newfound grace. Because I wasn't ready to be part of a family then. I was too focused on my job and forgot about the important things. But you and your dad taught me what really matters. What's that? That the best part of any day is coming home to people who love you. Tommy considered this seriously. Dad says that too. He says work is just what you do between the fun parts. Mike smiled, remembering countless evenings when he tried to explain why he had to work so much. The fun parts are what make all the hard work worth it. Like right now? Tommy asked, sauce on his chin and happiness in his eyes. Exactly like right now, Mike and Grace said simultaneously, then laughed at their synchronization. By summer, Grace had officially established the Patterson Foundation, and she'd made a surprising request. She wanted Mike to be the executive director. I can't run a foundation, Grace. I'm a janitor. You're not just a janitor, Michael. You're someone who understands what struggling families need. You've lived it. You know which programs actually help and which ones just sound good on paper. They were sitting in Grant Park, watching Tommy play on the jungle gym with other kids. It was one of their regular Saturday outings, a tradition that had evolved naturally over the past few months. I don't have a college degree, Mike protested. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. I can teach you the business side. What I can't teach is the heart you'd bring to it. The foundation needs someone who genuinely cares about keeping families together. Mike watched Tommy help a younger child reach the monkey bars, his natural kindness on full display. What would that mean for us? For this arrangement we have? It means you'd have a steady income, good benefits, and the flexibility to be the father Tommy needs. The foundation would be based here in Chicago, and we'd work together to help other families avoid what we went through. You'd want to work with me? After everything? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Michael, you saved my son when I couldn't. You gave him 7 years of love and stability that I was too selfish to provide. Now I want to help you save other families. It feels like the right way to honor what you've done. Mike felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same emotion he'd felt when Tommy first called him dad, when he'd fought for custody, when he'd held his son after their reunion. It was the feeling of being needed, of having a purpose beyond survival. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all I ask. That evening, Mike discussed the opportunity with Tommy over dinner. Grace wants me to help run her foundation, the one that helps families like ours. That sounds important, Tommy said, twirling spaghetti around his fork with the concentration of a surgeon. It would mean working with Grace every day. How would you feel about that? Tommy looked up, his green eyes serious. Do you like Grace now? Mike considered the question carefully. I like who she's becoming. She hurt us, but she's trying to make it right. That takes courage. Mrs. Chen says that people can change if they really want to. Do you think Grace really wants to change? I think she does. What do you think? I think she's sad about missing so much of my life, but she's trying to be better. And I think she makes you less worried about money. Mike laughed, amazed by his son's perceptiveness. You're right about both of those things. Then maybe you should do it. But only if you want to, not because you feel like you have to. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best dad in the world. Mike reached across the table and ruffled Tommy's hair. You know what? I think we're going to be okay. All of us. 6 months later, the Patterson Foundation had helped 12 families avoid custody battles, provided emergency child care for 37 single parents, and established a legal aid clinic specifically for family court cases. Mike had thrown himself into the work with the same dedication he'd once applied to his 3 jobs, but now he was helping families instead of just surviving. Grace had been true to her word, teaching Mike the business side while letting him lead the programmatic decisions. She'd also surprised him with her willingness to do unglamorous work. She'd spent an entire Saturday helping a single mother move apartments, and she'd become a regular volunteer at the foundation's weekend childcare program. You're different, Mike told her one evening as they locked up the foundation office. Tommy was at a sleepover with his friend Connor, giving them a rare opportunity to work late. Different how? More. Human. Less like a doctor. More like a person. Grace laughed, the sound more genuine than Mike had ever heard from her. I think that's the nicest insult I've ever received. It wasn't meant as an insult. I'm just saying, if you'd been this person 7 years ago, maybe things would have been different. But then Tommy wouldn't have had you as his father. And honestly, Michael, I don't think I could have been this person 7 years ago. I needed to lose everything to understand what really mattered. They walked to their cars in comfortable silence, their relationship having evolved into something neither of them had expected, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared love for Tommy. Grace, Mike said as they reached her car, thank you for everything. The foundation, the steady income, the way you've respected our boundaries. You've kept every promise you made. I had a lot of promises to keep, she replied softly. I'm just glad you gave me the chance. As Mike drove home to his new apartment, larger now, with a proper bedroom for Tommy and a home office where he could work on foundation business, he reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. Not just financially, though the stability was a blessing he never took for granted, but emotionally too. Tommy was thriving in ways Mike had never expected. The boy who had once been mature beyond his years now felt free to be a child. He joined the school soccer team, started taking piano lessons, and had even convinced Mike to adopt a rescue doga golden retriever mix named Buddy, who had immediately claimed Tommy's bed as his own. Dad, I'm home, Tommy called out as Mike entered the apartment. How was the sleepover? Amazing. Connor's mom made pancakes that looked like Mickey Mouse, and we stayed up until midnight playing video games. But I missed you and Buddy. As if summoned by his name, Buddy appeared from Tommy's room, tail wagging and ready for his evening walk. How about we take Buddy to the park, and you can tell me all about your adventure? Can we call Grace and see if she wants to come? She said she's never thrown a frisbee before. Mike smiled, pulling out his phone. I think that's a great idea. 20 minutes later, they were in Lincoln Park, watching Grace attempt to throw a frisbee while Buddy ran in enthusiastic circles. Tommy was doubled over with laughter as Grace's throws went wildly off course. I think I need lessons, Grace called out, chasing after the frisbee that had somehow ended up in a tree. Here, let me show you, Tommy said, retrieving the frisbee and demonstrating the proper wrist motion. You have to flick it, not throw it like a baseball. Mike watched his son patiently teach Grace the fundamentals of frisbee throwing, the evening sun casting golden light over their impromptu family scene. It struck him that this was what happiness looked like, not the absence of problems, but the presence of people who chose to love each other despite their imperfections. Dad, catch, Tommy called out, sending a perfect throw in Mike's direction. Mike caught the frisbee and sent it sailing toward Grace, who managed to catch it with both hands in a triumphant shout. I did it! Did you see that? We saw it, Mike laughed. You're getting the hang of it. As they continued playing, other families in the park began to notice their joy. Children asked if they could join in, and soon they had an impromptu game of frisbee with half a dozen kids and their parents. This is how it should be, Grace said quietly to Mike as they watched Tommy organizing the children into teams. Kids just playing together, families supporting each other. No judgment, no competition, just community. Is that what we are now? Mike asked. A community? I think we're a family, Grace replied. Maybe not a traditional one, but a real one. The kind that chooses to be together. Mike nodded, watching Tommy high-five a younger child who had just made his first successful catch. Yeah, I think you're right. As the sun began to set, they gathered their things and prepared to head home. Tommy was exhausted but happy, grass stains on his jeans and a smile that hadn't faded all evening. Grace, are you coming to my school concert next week? Tommy asked as they walked back to their cars. I wouldn't miss it. Are you nervous? A little. But Dad says being nervous means you care about doing well. Your dad is very wise, Grace said, meeting Mike's eyes with a look of gratitude. I know, Tommy said, matter-of-factly. That's why I got so lucky when Mom left me with him. The casual way Tommy referred to his abandonment, without anger or sadness, struck both adults silent. In his young mind, Grace's decision to leave had been not a betrayal but a gift. The gift of being raised by someone who would love him unconditionally. Tommy, Grace said carefully, do you ever wonder about your biological father? About Jonathan? Tommy considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But Dad says that some people are in our lives to teach us things, and some people are in our lives to stay. Jonathan taught me that I needed a dad who would choose me every day. And Dad stayed. Mike felt his eyes mist as he listened to his son's wisdom. And what about Grace? What do you think her role is? Grace is here to make sure other kids get dads like you. And to be our friend. And to learn how to be part of a family. Grace wiped away a tear, overwhelmed by the generosity of Tommy's perspective. What did I do to deserve such forgiveness? You didn't have to deserve it, Tommy said simply. That's what families do, they forgive each other. Later that evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Mike found himself looking through the photo album they'd created together. 7 years of memories, now joined by newer pictures that included Grace birthday parties, foundation events, quiet Sunday dinners, and everyday moments that had become precious. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Thank you for today, for every day, for teaching me what family really means." Mike typed back, "Thank you for fighting for us, even when it meant fighting against yourself. Tomorrow is Tommy's piano recital practice. Want to come? Wouldn't miss it. We're in this together now." Together, Mike agreed. As he turned off the lights and checked on Tommy one last time, Mike reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 7 years ago, he'd been a terrified young man left with a baby and no idea how to be a father. Now he was part of something bigger, a family that had been broken and rebuilt, a foundation that was helping other families stay together, and a future that felt bright with possibility. Tommy stirred in his sleep, and Mike gently tucked the covers around him. "Love you, buddy," he whispered. "Love you too, Dad." Tommy mumbled, without opening his eyes. Mike smiled and headed to his own room, where Buddy was already curled up at the foot of the bed, waiting for his humans to be settled for the night. 1 year later, Mike stood in the courthouse where he'd once faced the possibility of losing Tommy forever. But today was different. Today, he was here to make their family official. Judge Harrison, the same judge who had initially granted Grace custody, looked down at the adoption papers with a smile. "Mr. Patterson, I have to say, this is one of the most unusual cases I've ever seen. It's not often that a biological mother petitions the court to support someone else's adoption of her child." Grace, sitting in the front row, nodded. "Your Honor, Michael Patterson has been Tommy's father in every way that matters since he was 3 months old. I'm here to support what should have been official long ago." Tommy, now 8 and even more articulate than before, had asked to address the court directly. "Your Honor, my dad didn't have to love me, but he chose to. Every single day for 8 years, he chose to be my dad. The paper you're going to sign doesn't make him my father, it just makes it so everyone else knows what we've always known." Judge Harrison's eyes misted. "Tommy, is there anything else you'd like to say?" "Just that I'm the luckiest kid in the world because I have a dad who picked me, and now I have Grace too, who's teaching me that families can grow and change and still be full of love." The judge looked at the legal documents before her, then at the unusual family gathered in her courtroom. "In all my years on the bench, I've never seen a clearer case of what's in the best interest of a child. Michael Patterson, I hereby grant your petition for adoption. Tommy is now officially, legally, and permanently your son." The courtroom erupted in quiet applause from the small gathering. Rebecca Martinez, Dr. Chen, Mrs. Chen from Tommy's school, Miguel from the hospital, and several families who had been helped by the Patterson Foundation. After the ceremony, they gathered at their favorite restaurant for a celebration lunch. Tommy insisted on sitting between Mike and Grace, symbolically bridging the two most important adults in his life. "Dad, now that it's official, can we talk about getting a bigger apartment?" "Buddy is getting too big for my room," Mike laughed. "Actually, I have some news about that. Grace and I have been discussing something." Tommy's eyes lit up with curiosity. "What kind of something?" Grace leaned forward. "Well, the foundation has been so successful that we're expanding. We're opening a residential facility for families in Cressisa Place where single parents can stay while they get back on their feet." "That sounds amazing," Tommy said. "But what does that have to do with our apartment?" "The facility needs a director who lives on site," Mike explained. "Someone who can be there for families 24 hours a day, who understands what they're going through. And," Grace added, "it comes with a beautiful house on the grounds. 3 bedrooms, a big yard for Buddy, and a separate apartment for me so I can help with the program." Tommy's face broke into the biggest smile Mike had ever seen. "You mean like my block house? Where we're all together, but we each have our own space?" "Exactly like your block house," Mike confirmed. "What do you think?" "I think it's perfect. I think we're perfect." Mike looked around the table at the people who had become his family in the most unexpected way. Grace, who had learned to love by letting go, Tommy, who had taught them all about forgiveness, and himself, who had discovered that being a father wasn't about biology but about choice, commitment, and endless love. "Yeah," he said, raising his glass of lemonade for a toast. "I think we're perfect too." 6 months later, the Patterson Family Crisis Center opened its doors. The main house where Mike and Tommy lived was surrounded by smaller family units where single parents could stay for up to a year while they stabilized their lives. Grace lived in a converted carriage house on the property, close enough to help but far enough to give Mike and Tommy their independence. The center provided not just housing but comprehensive support childcare, job training, legal aid, counseling, and most importantly, a community of people who understood the challenges of single parenting. "Dad, look!" Tommy called out one evening as Mike was finishing his office work. Mrs. Rodriguez's baby took its first steps. Mike looked out the window to see Tommy playing with several children in the center's playground while their parents watched from nearby benches. The scene was everything he'd hoped for when they'd first discussed the project. "That's wonderful, buddy. Did you congratulate him?" I clapped really loud, and he clapped back. Grace says babies learn by copying what they see, so I'm trying to be a good example. Mike smiled, watching his son naturally take on the role of big brother to the younger children at the center. Tommy had thrived in the environment, his natural empathy and wisdom making him a favorite among the families they served. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Grace had never come back?" Mike considered the question carefully. "Sometimes." "Why?" "I think we would have been happy just the two of us. But I'm glad she came back because now we can help other families, and she learned how to be part of our family too." "What do you think the most important thing is that she learned?" Tommy thought for a moment. "That love isn't about giving someone everything they want. It's about giving them what they need. And what I needed was you." Mike felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the feeling of being so proud of his son that his heart could barely contain it. "And what do you think I needed?" "You needed to know that you were my real dad, even without the DNA. And you needed to stop working so hard all the time so you could just be my dad." "And what did Grace need?" "She needed to learn that being a mom isn't about being perfect. It's about being there. And now she gets to be like a mom to all the kids here, helping their parents take care of them." Mike marveled at his 8-year-old's understanding of their complex family dynamics. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" "I learned from the best." Tommy grinned, then grew serious. "Dad, I want to ask you something important." "Okay, when I grow up, I want to help families like ours. Will you teach me how to run the foundation?" Mike's heart swelled with pride and love. "I would be honored to teach you. But you know what? I think you're already teaching me." "Teaching you what?" "That family isn't about who you start with. It's about who you choose to keep, who you choose to help, and who you choose to love, even when it's hard." Tommy nodded sagely. "Grace says that's the most important thing she learned from us." "What's that?" "That love isn't something you find, it's something you do." As the sun set over the Patterson Family Crisis Center, Mike watched the families they served gathering for their evening meal in the community dining hall. Grace was there, helping serve food and listening to the stories of the newest arrivals. Tommy was there too, entertaining the children with his silly jokes and boundless energy. Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Monthly report: 15 families housed, 8 parents found permanent employment, 3 custody battles resolved in favor of keeping families together. But the real victory is watching Tommy teach the other kids how to throw a frisbee. "That boy has your heart." Mike typed back, "He has all of our hearts. That's what makes us family." "Family," Grace replied. "The kind that chooses each other every day." Mike looked out at the scene before him, children playing, parents supporting each other, a community built on the foundation of love and second chances. It was everything he'd dreamed of during those long nights when he'd wondered if he was enough for Tommy. He was enough. They all were. And together, they were helping other families discover that they were enough too. Twist number 5. The final revelation. 2 years after the adoption, on Tommy's 10th birthday, Grace arrived at the celebration with an unusual gift-sealed envelope addressed to Tommy. "What's this?" Tommy asked, examining the expensive paper in formal handwriting. "It's from your biological father," Grace said quietly. "From Jonathan. He wrote it before he died, but asked me to give it to you when you turned 10. Mike tensed, worried about what revelations the letter might contain. But Tommy opened it with characteristic composure, reading silently while the adults waited. After a few minutes, Tommy looked up with tears in his eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. He says he's proud of the man I'm becoming and that he's grateful that I found such a good dad. He says he hopes I'll use the money he left me to help other kids find families like ours. Tommy handed the letter to Mike, who read it with growing amazement. Jonathan Hamilton had left his entire estate, nearly $50 million to Tommy, with specific instructions that it be used to expand the Patterson Foundation's work. He wants us to open centers in other cities, Tommy said excitedly. He wants us to help thousands of families stay together. Grace wiped away tears. He spent his last months researching family court systems, learning about the problems single parents face. He wanted to make amends for abandoning you by helping other children avoid that fate. Mike looked at the letter, then at his son, then at Grace. Tommy, this is your money. You get to decide what to do with it. I want to do what Jonathan wanted, but I want to do it with you and Grace. Together. Together, Mike agreed. Together, Grace echoed. 5 years later, the Patterson Foundation operated family crisis centers in 12 cities, had prevented over 300 unnecessary family separations, and had helped thousands of single parents achieve stability. Tommy, now 15, split his time between being a regular teenager and serving as the foundation's youngest board member. Mike and Grace had developed a partnership that surprised everyone, including themselves. They worked together seamlessly, balancing Mike's understanding of struggling families with Grace's medical expertise and business acumen. They had also developed something else, a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd gotten married? Grace asked one evening as they worked late at the foundation's headquarters. Mike looked up from the budget reports he was reviewing. Honestly, I think we would have been terrible for each other back then. We were both too selfish in different ways. And now? Now we're better people because of Tommy. He made us both want to be worthy of his love. Grace smiled. He made us want to be worthy of each other's friendship too. Speaking of Tommy, did you know he's been talking about medical school? Really? He wants to be a doctor? He says he wants to be a pediatrician who specializes in helping kids from broken homes. He wants to understand the medical and psychological aspects of family trauma. Grace's eyes misted. Jonathan would be so proud. We're all proud, Mike said gently. That kid is going to change the world. He already has. He changed ours. That weekend, the three of them visited Jonathan's grave for the first time together. Tommy had requested it for his 15th birthday, saying he wanted to thank his biological father for the legacy that had allowed them to help so many families. I brought you something, Tommy said, placing a framed photo on the gravestone. It showed the three of them at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for their latest family center, surrounded by the families they'd helped. I wanted you to see what we did with your gift. We turned it into love for people who needed it. Grace says, that's what you would have wanted. Mike and Grace stood on either side of Tommy, their hands on his shoulders, as he continued. I want you to know that I'm not angry that you couldn't raise me. I understand that you weren't ready, but I'm grateful that you made sure I ended up with Dad, even if you didn't mean to. And I'm grateful that you brought Grace back into our lives so she could learn how to be part of our family. Tommy paused, then added with wisdom beyond his years. I think maybe everyone gets the family they need, even if it's not the family they expected. As they walked back to their car, Grace turned to Mike. Thank you. For what? For showing me what real love looks like. For teaching me that being a parent isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. For letting me be part of your family even after I tried to tear it apart. Grace, you're not part of our family because we let you be. You're part of our family because you chose to become someone worth loving, and because Tommy has the biggest heart in the world. And because you're the kind of man who believes in second chances. Mike smiled, watching Tommy already planning their next foundation project in his head. I believe in love. And I believe that love is stronger than mistakes, stronger than biology, stronger than anything that tries to tear families apart. That's what you taught me, Grace said softly. That love isn't something you find, it's something you do, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Mike agreed. As they drove home to the Family Crisis Center, where other families were learning the same lessons they had learned, Mike reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a desperate young man, a baby, and a choice to love unconditionally. It had nearly ended with a custody battle that could have destroyed everything. But it had become something beautiful. Family built on choice rather than chance. a foundation that helped other families stay together, and a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. "Dad," Tommy said from the back seat, "do you think Jonathan knew? When he wrote that letter, do you think he knew we'd become a real family?" Mike looked at Grace, who was smiling through tears. "I think he hoped," Mike said. "And I think hope is sometimes all it takes to change everything." "Good," Tommy said, settling back in his seat. "Because I'm hoping that when I have kids someday, I'll be as good a dad as you are." "You will be," Mike and Grace said simultaneously, then laughed at their synchronization. "Better than good," Mike added. "You'll be extraordinary. Because that's what happens when you're raised by love." As they pulled into the driveway of their home, surrounded by the families they'd helped and the community they'd built, Mike realized that their story had come full circle. It had started with a choice to love an abandoned child and had grown into a mission to help other families make the same choice. The DNA test that had once threatened to destroy their family had ultimately freed them to build something stronger, a bond based not on genetics, but on daily acts of love, sacrifice, and commitment. And in the end, that was the most important lesson of all. That family isn't about who you start with, but who you choose to keep, who you choose to help, and who you choose to love, no matter what. The Patterson family had learned that love multiplies when it's shared, that forgiveness can transform the worst mistakes into the greatest gifts, and that sometimes the most broken things can be rebuilt into something more beautiful than they ever were before. As Tommy ran ahead to tell the other kids about their day, Mike and Grace stood together, watching their son spread joy wherever he went. "We did good," Grace said quietly. "We did," Mike agreed, "and we're just getting started." Above them, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars Mike had once promised Tommy he loved him more than. Now those stars seemed to shine with the blessing of everyone who had been part of their journey. Jonathan, who had given them the resources to help others. Rebecca, who had fought for them in court. Dr. Chen, who had helped them heal, and all the families who had taught them that love comes in many forms. Their story had begun with a single dad cleaning a bathroom with his son when a mysterious woman appeared, and he froze in shock. It had become a testament to the power of love to transform lives, heal wounds, and create families in the most unexpected ways. And as Mike tucked Tommy into bed that night, listening to his son's prayers for all the families they were helping, he knew that their greatest adventure was still ahead of them, a lifetime of choosing love every single day, no matter what challenges came their way. "Love you, Dad," Tommy whispered in the darkness. "Love you too, son. More than all the stars in the sky, and more than all the families we've helped." Mike smiled, his heart full of the kind of joy that only comes from living a life devoted to love. "Even more than that, because you taught me that love isn't measured by how much you give, it's measured by how much you're willing to give up for the people you love." "Good night, Dad." "Good night, Tommy. Sweet dreams." As Mike closed the door and headed to his own room, he paused to look out the window at the Family Crisis Center grounds, where other single parents were tucking their own children into bed, learning the same lessons he had learned. That love is a choice, that family is what you make it, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to be worthy of being loved. The Patterson family had taught the world that DNA doesn't make a family, love does. And their love would continue to multiply, touching lives for generations to come.